Okay, let's start. We're in the middle of chapter 18, Perek Yud, but because we didn't meet last week, it's been a couple of weeks, and I know more than 15 minutes, and my brain just kind of forgets a lot of stuff. So I just want to give a basic review of what we talked about at the beginning of chapter 18. What we did last time, we gave a little review of everything up till chapter 18, and said that the chunk of chapters from 12 to 17 dealt with the topic of the Benoni, the topic of how it is, and especially towards the latter part, especially chapter 17, how is it that even without our fully focusing and fully concentrating on doing a mitzvah, that as long as we are motivated by something, our brain thinks or does something, then Hashem kicks in, so to speak, and he takes it from there. And we talked about the machashava tova, a good intention, a good thought, meaning the idea that you want to do the mitzvah and you're doing it because Hashem commanded you. Mitztarafa kadosh baruch hu l'maaseh, Hashem makes it as if you did an action. What action? It means it's as if you did it with all the bells and whistles. You did it to the best of your ability. And we said that that was what was called karov elecha davar me'od, that it was exceedingly close to you, exceedingly attainable. And then we came into the next chapter, chapter 18, and said, wait a second. Yes, it sounds almost too good to be true, almost too easy. But this ma'od business, is we have to understand, how is it that, maybe someone who has enough of a common sense and connection to Hashem can stop before mitzvah, can stop before davening, just even for a little bit and think, and then they do the action, then that all kicks in, and that's the me'od. It's exceedingly attainable. What about someone who can't? They just stone heart. They don't take any time to focus and concentrate on anything. They don't even think about God. They'll go through the motions. So how can we say that it's karov me'od? Because it doesn't say it's karov only to people who can think. It doesn't say it's karov to people who daven 3 times a day. The words are ki karov elecha davar me'od beficha u'b'levacha la'asoto. Everybody. So what about these people? How can we say that it's exceedingly close? And not only is the love for Hashem exceedingly close, but yirat Hashem as well, the fear/awe of God. And he posited the following question. I can sort of understand that the fact is that we received this in as part of our DNA, our Jewish neshama's DNA, not our physical DNA, that we can have love for Hashem. This, what we know as the ahava mesuteret, this innate love. But how do you inherit awe or fear of Hashem? How does that happen? When a baby is born, very quickly, barring any, God forbid, problems and circumstances that are not normal, there is a bond that comes into existence between parent and child, and especially mother and child having carried the baby, where this love is not, the baby doesn't know how to express it, but at some point, after a couple of months, there is an expression that could already be seen in the eyes, love. Later on, there's this idea of being awe of the parent or fear of the parent in a mild sense. So how do we say that our Jewish DNA is able to enable us to have both an innate love and an innate yirah of Hashem? And that's where we left off. And what I want to do is take a look at a couple slides, which will go a little bit more into depth to explain this whole situation. Just kind of like a little bit of a update here, what we're going to do tonight, or this afternoon, if you're joining us from Chutz La'aretz. Hi, David. The idea we're going to answer this question, start to answer the question of how is it that someone who really doesn't ever put an effort, doesn't have a thought process, doesn't do what's called hitbonenut, concentrating, introspection, yet that person also has a way to connect to Hashem me'od. It's karov elecha davar me'od. It's exceedingly attainable. We're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk about how does that work with yirah, with the fear/awe of Hashem. We're going to talk a little Kabbalistically, which I will give you some. I will read and explain some, and then we're going to listen to my Rav explain for about 5-7 minutes a section, because he does a much better job than I will. And we'll go from there. But let's take a look first at this first slide. Okay. Well, the first slide is Tanya in chapter 18. So that's cool. Okay. Let us. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so he said, where does this ahava come from? Where does this ahavat Hashem come from? Even for the person who has no connection, for the person who doesn't do any introspection, we still say it's karov me'od. How? So he says the following: B'fivu v'elvavo mamash, literally, actually in his mouth and in his heart. What does that mean? Ritzono lomar shekarov elecha hu. When it says karov elecha, it's exceedingly close to you. Lo rak la'asot lomar et advarim b'feh. It's not just that it's simple. I can simply, easily say, I love God, I thank God, Hashem is the best, and I owe everything to Hashem. It's lip service. I can say it. But even the belief, the internal belief of that, is also karov to you, is exceedingly easily to achieve. Ubilvavo mamash, literally in your heart. Even further than that. Oops. Me'umka de liba. It comes me'omakale from the depths of one's heart. The emet lamito. What does that mean? Not this made up pretend love and your av Hashem she'elam basis that has no basis in fact whatsoever. Which means with fear and with love of Hashem. How? Where does this person get it from? That every Jew has it. We have talked about this topic of ahava mesuteret many times already before. But now he's going to take it to a different level. Number one, he's going to tell us that we have this innate love. And number two, it's a Yerusha me'avoteinu. It is an inheritance from our forefathers. Explanation. Even a person who's not able to awaken his mind, shemitzad kishurav, from this perspective of his skills, hu mugbal, he's say mugbal in English, he's wish I could remember English. You can't go further than a certain place. Oh, gosh, it'll come to me. Ve'en lo moach lifol, he doesn't have a brain to kick into gear about this. He just doesn't have the mental capacity. We're not talking about someone who has, God forbid, a mental health issue. We're talking about this person just can't get his mind into it. There are plenty of people like that. They can't necessarily just start thinking about God and getting their hearts going. He also can get into the state of love of Hashem, that can also spring forth from the depths of one's heart. This the Mechaber refers to, the author refers to as this innate / hidden love that's in the heart of every single Jew. You use the expression, you've heard the expression many times, the pintalayid, the dot, the little point of the Jew. That's what this is as well, the pintalayid. We talked about this many, many chapters ago. Also, that gave the example of Daniel Pearl, Hashem Yikom Damo, who was slaughtered, and the last thing he said, he had no connection really to his Judaism. He was Jewish. He says, I was Jewish, I'm born Jewish, my mother was Jewish, and that was like one of the last things. Where did that come from? The ahava mesuteret. Enzo ahava novat mehatoda'a ha'ishit ha'pi'ila shelo. This love of God doesn't come from this awareness, this personal act of awareness that he has, but rather it comes from a form of Torah of his genetics, in a sense, something he has his inheritance. His connection is to the essence of all Jews. By dint of the fact that he's a child of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Let me make this bigger, obviously. This connection that we have that flows through the neshama of every single Jew is the basis of the connection of all Jews. That this connects, this root, the shoresh, in every person, unifies all the neshamot that connect back to Hashem, which means, think about this for a second. We're going to get a little bit more into this Kabbalistically soon. But every Jew has in their being, in their essence, a direct connection to Am Yisrael and to Hashem. You can imagine we all walk around with a rope, so to speak, in our hand. That rope connects to every single other rope of Am Yisrael, and all those ropes connect and go to Hashem. I heard a wonderful concept. I actually heard it from a Reform rabbi many years ago, and then I found out it was in the Zohar, I think. It's a beautiful thought. He said, why is it sometimes when a person has gone off the derech, they were religious and they're no longer religious and they come back, why is it that sometimes that connection feels even stronger than ever before? So he said, imagine you're walking, that's why I guess I thought of this idea of the rope. He said, imagine you're walking with a rope, that you're connected to Hashem. And every time you do something wrong, a little ding, a little piece of that rope starts to fray to the point where now it completely breaks because you've decided to disconnect from God. When you reconnect, what do? How do you take two ropes and connect them? You can't glue it together. What do? You tie them, right? So you tie them. So what happens when you tie them, the rope gets shorter. You get closer to Hashem. I thought it was a beautiful idea. But let's go on to here. This kind of love, sometimes the person gets to that love at the very last moment of his life. At that moment, that person potentially who's being led off to his death or whatever it might be, or sees he's about to, God forbid, die in some kind of an accident, and he goes into the Shema Yisrael or whatever it might be, he's no longer acting on his own volition as an individual person, but rather he returns to his original root, the point which you can't even describe, omek rum, omek ha'elyon, is the depths of the height. It's a paradox, because the depths is the lowest, and elyon is the highest. So what does that mean? And from there, he draws the power and the strength to serve Hashem. This essential, this I'm forgetting English, sorry. Yerusha, this inheritance, that's found in the depths of every neshama. You don't create it, nor do you have any control over it. Now, let's stop for 1 second. One of the theses of this book is that you have the ability to control your nefesh habahamit and your nefesh elokit, right? It's the war. Remember, it's a battle between the nefesh elokit and nefesh habahamit, your animal soul and your godly soul. That we have the ability to have some rule over. We talked about how the animal soul rules over the Russia, how the Benoni, putting the tzaddik aside, but the Benoni can rule over, can use its nefesh elokit, the godly soul, to rule over the nefesh habahamit, the animalistic soul. But this, Yahava Mesuteret, we have no control over it. It's there. We didn't create it. But Yachadim Zot, at the same time, Gadol Kocha lefanes et chayav ha'ishim kashem shegadol Kocha lefanes et ha'chaim shel Klal Yisrael. The loose translation. In spite of the fact that we didn't create it, in spite of the fact that we have no control over it, it itself acts as a source of tremendous power to give sustenance to our personal lives and our connection to Am Yisrael. Mashem ma'amid et Klal Yisrael, that which sustains Am Yisrael, and all the fact that we are sustained and exist from one generation to the next. It's the true, simple belief in God by the average Jew. That's what keeps us going. Doesn't come from anywhere from intellect. It's not where it's coming from. It's from this hidden innate love. It's a love that comes specifically as an inheritance from our forefathers. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of this. I want to do, though, is I want to read the beginning of the answer. Now, if I say the answer, it's going to be quite a bit of time because I told you that chapters 18 through 25 are going to deal with this topic. But what I want to be a little more specific. At the beginning of the book, in the front page, and we talked about this last time a couple of weeks ago, we said that there's a derech aruka and a derech kitzara. There's a long way to get to this love and deal with of connecting to Hashem, and then the short way. In chapters that we came to before, up until including chapter 17, we were dealing with the derech aruka, the long way. How we had to do some action, we had to do some work, we had to engage ourselves, engage our minds, engage our feelings, and to raise up some movement in ourselves. This section is the derech tzara, the shorter way. Now, short doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be less chapters. It doesn't mean it's going to be less words. But we'll see as we move through how this ahava mesuteret, which is, quote, a shortcut, I'm using that term very loosely right now, enables us to connect to Hashem to such an extent that even we're going to see the most pashut person, and not only the most pashut or simple person, but even a Rasha can somehow connect to Hashem. Let's take a look. The matter is as follows. How do we know, where do we get this idea that we can have this morasha, this inheritance from our forefathers? Ki ha'avot hein hamerkava. Our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, Shlomo, all of our forefathers are known, to say the avot, we're known as a merkava. What's a merkava? Merkava is a chariot. So let's take a look for a second. No, here, make this small. Here's a chariot. Nice little illustration of a chariot. What is the brilliance in saying that our avot, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, were a chariot for the carrying of the Shekhinah? What does that mean? So if we take a look here at this horse, and we have a chariot or a buggy. Okay, it's not really a chariot. It's more of a buggy, but okay, it's pretty. So let's assume for a moment, and let's try this. No, forget that. Trying to be cute, it's not going to work. Let me get rid of it. Okay. I'll just use this here. Let's assume for a moment that the connection between the horse and the chariot is broken. They take the horse off and they put it in the barn or whatever, the stall, the horse barn for the night. What happens with this chariot? What does it do? The answer is nothing. It just sits there until the horse is hooked up and pulls it. Until then, it doesn't do anything. It is 100%, not 90%, not 99%, 100% subservient to the horse. It doesn't move until the horse makes it move. It doesn't stop till the horse makes it stop. It has no action of its own. It is 100% here. Calling the avot chariots or merkava meant that they kol kulo had given their entire, which we referred to many times before as bitul. Bitul is the idea of nullifying yourself, which is not something we are able to do for the most part, but it is the extreme of subservience to Hashem. That they eat, live, drink, breathe Hashem, and that where their being was. And by the fact that they were the Merkava, they had this level that we cannot begin to understand of their connection to Hashem. Therefore, Va'al Kain, therefore, Zachul lahamshich naran livnehem. They were able to, I gave it as a Nun Resh Nun, an abbreviation, but it's Nefesh Ruach Neshama. We're going to come back to that. The Neshama we have, we talk about a person's Nefesh, Ruach is the spirit, Neshama is the soul. These are used often interchangeably. They're basically just, again, very simplistically, different levels of a Neshama, of a soul. So it says, because Alkein Zahu, because of this, because of who they were, Zahu, they merited. They were able to give it continuity and pass along to their children after them, ad olam, forever. This neshama, me'esa sfirot kedusha be'arba olamot, atzilut, bria, yitzira, asiya. They were able to pass along the 10 that we talk about, the sfirot, the emanations of God. That's the same idea that within us we have these 10 sfirot, the 10 emanations of holiness in the 4 worlds. Again, this is a topic we've dealt with briefly before. Atzilut, the highest level, the level up by the Kisei HaKavod by Hashem. Bria, creation. Yitzira, formation. And Asiyah is this world. This is the Olam Asiyah. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into this words at the moment. We're going to see when Rav Silberberg talks to us in a few minutes. We'll see a little bit more about that. What does it mean, though, that these Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were such a high level that they were able to bequeath to us in the Jewish DNA, to Jewish neshama, the highest level of kedusha, the highest level of holiness from all the 4 worlds that exist in the 4 worlds of Atzilut, Bria, Yitzia, and Asiyah. Again, these are not physical; these are spiritual worlds. L'chol echad ve'echad, to each and every individual, kefi madrigato, based on his or her level, u'kefi ma'asav, and based on his or her actions. Okay, before we go further, we have to understand this. Okay, we have to understand what he's talking about here. For those of you who've been here since the beginning, I don't mean tonight, but I mean since we started the book, you'll remember that we talked about the anatomy of the Jewish soul back in chapter 2. We talked about also that not all souls are created the same. All of Am Yisrael is one, based on one neshama, but they're all different neshamot. Some neshamot are very high level, some neshamot are very low level. We talked about, well, that's not fair. Who said anything about being fair? Well, since when is Judaism or religion about being fair? If it was fair, then there would not be Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim. There would be a lot of differences in halacha. It's not about being fair. It's about how Hashem wants us to act and what our jobs are in this world. So if every single Jew has this Ahava Mesuteret and has this innate something from the Avot, then how is it that we don't have all the same level? How is that? Because our neshamot are different. So first of all, we have each one gets this morasha, gets this inheritance based on the amount of that Ahava Mesuteret, on his madrega, on the level of his neshama, and also based on his actions. Well, wait a minute. When do you get your neshama? So there's a machlok in the Gemara. Do you get it when you're in utero? Do you get it when you're born? But in either case, you get it before you're doing any actions. So how is it determined up front that you're going to get this morasha of a certain level based on your actions? You haven't done anything yet except cry and fill a diaper. Going to come back to that. V'al kol panim. Nevertheless, we have to understand, afilu lakal shebekalim u'poshei Yisrael, even the simplest Jew, and even those who are transgressors among the Jewish people, nimshach bezivugam nefesh de nefesh de malchut da'asiyah, ki hamadriga tachtona shebikushat asiyah. Let me free translate and show you a slide. This is where it gets a little hairy. That even the lowest person, even the Russia, has some connection, again, because he's Jewish and has a Jewish neshama and connects therefore back to the Avot. Even if their level of their neshama is the lowest possible level. Now, what does that mean? Let's take a look. There we go. Okay, make this bigger. I tried to make a little chart here to indicate what this section is talking about. Rav Silverberg will make it, I believe, a little bit more understandable when we get to that. The four spiritual worlds we talked about, Atzilut, Briat, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, they break down, they have below them 10 levels, 10 subcategories, the lowest one being Malchut. The Malchut level breaks down into 3 more categories, Narana, Ruach, Neshama, and Nefesh. The last one, Nefesh, breaks down into another subset, Ruach, Neshama, and Nefesh again. So the lowest possible level, all these worlds, spiritual worlds, and the emanations, and the Neshamot, and the subcategories is the Nefesh, this one, Sheben Nefesh, the soul in the soul. I'm just using the term right now very loosely. Sheben Malchut, in this lowest level of the 10 emanations. You're going like, what in the world is he talking about? Okay, so we're going to look first at a slide, and then we're going to listen to Rav Silverberg talk to us for a few minutes. Oops, here we go. Okay. This is the section we just read in the book. Let's take a look what the slide says. The lightest of the light, the transgressors of Israel, they're not the same thing. They don't exist necessarily in the same person. Person who's kalim is a person who's very light-headed, light-minded. They're not the brightest crayon in the box necessarily. They can't even necessarily. They're fine, but they just can't think beyond their face. Poshe Yisrael hu rasha, and a Poshe Yisrael is a rasha. Kal shebegalim hu adam im neshama pchuta. The kal shebegalim is a person who has a lower level neshama. Poshe Yisrael yachol liot, a person who's a transgressor may be gam adam im neshama gvoa. It could be a person with a very high level of a neshama. Adrabah, just the opposite. Very often it can happen that the fact that a person is such a tremendously great neshama causes that person to end up being a poshea, a transgressor. Neshama gdola doreshet pitronot gdolim upa'amim. Imishum hareka shahavayато haishit v'misiבות acherot. Adam eno motze et hapitronot b'kedusha. A person who has a tremendously high neshama demands these various pitronot, solutions that are very great in life. And sometimes because of various backgrounds, personal, other circumstances, a person is unable to find solutions in the area of Kedusha to solve his problem in life. And he may turn with all the power and strength of his great neshama, to the sitra achra inside, the opposite of kedusha. Why? Maybe to make God angry, or to find what he didn't find within holiness. Nevertheless, we're talking about a possibility here in this sentence of a combination of this kind of person. He is the lowest of the low as far as his knowledge and his intellect and his desire to grow. And he's also a rasha. He's not only becoming a rasha and doing bad things because he doesn't know better, but even with we say malice aforethought. Nevertheless, that's what I was showing in that little chart. He's saying here what I just showed you in that chart. The world of Asiya, this world, is the lowest of the 4 worlds of Atzilut, Bria, Yitzirah, and Asiya. And in this world of Asiya, there are 10 emanations, Kabbalistically speaking. The lowest one, as we saw in that chart, number 10, was Malchut. And in Malchut, yesh naran, nefesh, ruach, neshama. On the lowest level is nefesh. Ubenefesh yesh daran. And nefesh also has three subcategories. Abechinat tachton sheben hi nefesh. The nefesh zohi nefesh, the nefesh the malchut asiyah. I kind of ran through that last thing because it's exactly what I just showed you on the slide. Okay. Now, first I'm going to read something to you I typed up. Before I take the time to type it, I'll read it. Up to here, this means that our relationship, we haven't read all this stuff that really leads up to the sentence, but I'm going to read it anyways. This means that our relationship with Hashem is instinctive to us. It transcends logic. But, and this part we didn't get to yet, our job is to make it more than an instinct by using our bina and our da'at. We're going to get to that next time. But right now, the first half of this, where we go until it transcends logic, is what we just now said, that our relationship with Hashem is instinctive. But that's not good enough. It's not good enough that our relationship is just an instinct. A child instinctively loves their parent. But it also has to come out. It has to be expressed. So let's take a listen at this last section. Let's listen to Rav Silver work on these last few lines in Tanya, we just did. Click, control click.
יש לכם ביטוח בריאות פרטי,
First
לביטוח של קופת החולים. סיכוי טוב שכל חודש אתם זורקים כסף לפח.
Ava Mesuteres is synonymous. It's not the neshama has Ava Mesuteres, but as we'll soon come to discover, the neshama is that Ava to Hashem. But that we'll discover as in next period, in chapter 19. So now the Alter Rebbe is going to give us the technical details. From where does this neshama come? The Yiddish neshama. Me'eser is the last word in the line, around halfway down from the top of the page 46. Me'eser spheres the kedusha.
So right now he's talking about the last few lines that I was mentioning about these levels, etc. He's going to make it nice and clear.
This neshama comes from the 10 spheres of kedusha, of holiness, sheba arba oilamus, which are on the four worlds of Atzilus, Biriya, Yitzira, Asiya. As we discussed in previous parakim, that the Mekubalim talk about the fact that there are four worlds, Atzilus, Biriya, Yitzira, and Asiya. And we spoke a little about this a few shiurim ago. And every single world has within it 10 spheres. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, etc. Every neshama is rooted in one of the spheres of one of the worlds. A very, very high neshama will be rooted somewhere in the world of Atzilus. A very, very low neshama will be rooted in a sphera somewhere in the lowest world, which is the world of Asiya. And what does that mean practically? As we mentioned, higher and lower in Kedusha means how sensitive something is to Hashem and how batal it is to Hashem. So the higher the world, the higher the sphere, the more sensitive to Hashem and the more batal it is. So every single Yid has a neshama, and the neshama is rooted in one of these spheres. It's important to point out. So let's say your neshama is rooted in Bina of one of the worlds. So that means that by nature you will be a very cerebral person, because your neshama is rooted in Bina. And just a point to bring out. In general, we talk about the 10 spheres as being the tools through which Hashem creates the world. A neshama is different. A neshama isn't created by the 10 spheres, but a neshama is actually rooted in one of the 10 spheres. It's actually comes directly from one of them. It is just like the sphere is godliness, the neshama is a derivative of one of those. Not a creation of the sphere, but a derivative of that sphere. So let's say your neshama is Bina, so that's why you're a very thoughtful person, and your person who's an intellectual person, and that's why you're sitting by this shir here tonight. But that doesn't mean that you only have Bina, because every single one of the spheres in a system that's called Hiskalulus, there is no real English word to translate that, but Hiskalulus in Kabbalah means how every single sphera is intertwined and interconnected with all the others. As we know by Sphera So'imer, you have Chesed, but within Chesed, you have Gvura Sheba Chesed, and Tferes Sheba Chesed, and Chachma Sheba Chesed, you have everything within it. So the fact that your neshama comes from Bina, all that means is that by you, Bina is dominant. That doesn't mean that you don't have Chachma and Das and Chesed and Gvura, but every single person, their neshama is rooted in a specific sphera of one of the worlds. This is because of the Aves. The Aves were Zoicha, that every one of their children and their descendants for all generations has a neshama, and this neshama is rooted in one of the spheres of one of the four worlds. L'kol echad ve'echad, everyone receives a unique neshama, kefi madrigasayu kefi maisav, according to his madrega and according to his actions. What is?
Now, this is the point. He's going to clarify what I'd left with the question before about especially the ma'asav. How is it based on a person's actions? Because he gets his neshama before he does any actions.
What does that mean? It's kind of strange. You get a neshama according to your actions and according to your level. No, it would seem to me that your level is based on your neshama, not that your neshama is based on your level. And also, what does it mean that you get a neshama according to your actions? Don't you have free choice?
And you didn't even do any actions.
Didn't do any actions yet, right? So it would seem kfi madrigasi means we learned in Perik Beis and Tanya that Klal Yisrael, the entire Klal Yisrael is a body, is a krema achas shlema. We're one body. Some of us are the head, and some are the hands, and some are the feet, some are the toenails, some are the heart. So kifi madrigasi, according to the madrega of this particular yid within the structure of Klal Yisrael, that is the sort of level of neshama he receives, ukifi ma'asav, and according to his mission on this world. Every single person, based on the actions that they are going to have to do in this world, their mission, their divine mission, that is the level of the neshama they're going to receive. Even to the lowest of Yidden and the greatest sinner, nimshach bezivugam, when they have a zivug, in other words, and they have children. Because again, we're not talking about the neshamas they have, because that's not predetermined whether they're going to sin. But even sinners, when two sinners get together, a man and a woman, and they have a zivug, and therefore they have children, at the very least their child will have a nefesh de malchus da asiya. Just like you have nefesh ruach neshama, nefesh the lowest one, and due to the concept of iskalus, so you have nefesh sheben neshama and neshama sheben nefesh, right? Nefesh sheben nefesh is the lowest level. Malchus Avasi is the lowest level. The lowest of Yidden will bring down for their child a neshama, which is nefesh, the Malchus Dasiya. But the afal pikein still me'achar shehi me'eser spheres kedoshos. At the end of the day, yes, it might be Malchus Dasiya, the lowest level of the lowest world, but it is kedusha. It is from the 10 holy spheres. So therefore, he klula mikulan. As I mentioned earlier, the idea of iskalus. Therefore, all the spheres include one another. In other words, within Malchus Dasiya, there's also Chachma Dasiya. Right? Chachma de Malchus de Malchus de Chachma. So therefore, it includes Gam Chachma Dasiya. So let's say there's a person whose neshama is rooted in Malchus Dasiya, but because of the system of Iskalos, that means his neshama also contains Chachma Dasiya, which is the highest level of Asiya. Shebetoicha Melubashas. And within the Chachma of Asiya, there is Malchus Da'atzilus, Chachma de Malchus Da'atzilus.
He's reading a couple lines further than we got, but we're going to go back over it next week, Bezrat Hashem. But listen to what he has to say. It's wonderful.
That's the process. We're not going to get the whole Kabbalah of it. But the Chachma of Malchus of Atzilus manifests itself within Chachma of Asiya. Shebetoicha Chachma Da'atzilus, within it is the highest level of Chachma, which is the highest level of Atzilus. Sheba Meir Ein Seif Baruch Hu Mamash. Within Chachma Datzilus, there's the Ein Sof, the infinite light of Hashem is revealed there, which means that by the process of trickle down spiritual nomics, a process of Hiskalulos within every single Yiddish and Neshama, there's the Gili of Ein Sof, the Gili of Hashem's infinite light, even if it's from the lowest level of Asiya. It contains within it also from the highest level. Ki ein seif baruch hu melubash bebechinas v'nimtza, and it turns out, we skipped Kidduksiv, as the pasuk says, Hashem bechachma yasad aretz. So what is the literal translation of this pasuk? Hashem with wisdom, he established the land. But in Kabbalah we understand this, Hashem b'chachma. The Gilui of Havaya, the Gilui of Hashem, which is the Ein Sof, is in Chachma. And with that, Yasad Aretz, with that he established the very, very lowest level. Aretz here is a reference to Malchus da Asiya, the lowest level of Elam Asiya. And also of the Kulam b'chachma Asisa, which again also, Pashup Pshat, this means that Hashem created everything with wisdom, but it means also that even in the world of Asiya, which is the lowest level, there is the Gili of Chachma Datzilus, and Chachma Datzilus contains within it the Ein Sof. V'nimtzan, it turns out, ki Ein Sof Baruch Hu, that the Ein Sof of Hashem, Melubish, is invested by Bechines Chachma Shebenefesh HaAdam, within the level of Chachma, of the Nefesh, of the Neshama of every Yid, Yiyah Misha Yiyah Mi Yisrael. No matter who it may be, as long as a person's a Yid, there's the Gili of the Ein Sof.
My guess is some of your eyes are glazed over. I want to give you two pieces of information. One, if this is not clear, I'll try to clarify it next time. But you will not, the general idea is just understand that no matter where a person is, by the fact that they're Jewish and have a Jewish neshama, we can connect because of the avot, because of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And it's something that's passed down from generation to generation, even to the lowest level Jew. That's Aleph. Bet. It's not incumbent upon you to understand every detail of the Kabbalistic aspect, to understand the continuation of the book. When we get to chapter 19, Bezrat Hashem, he goes into a mashal, or a parable, that will help to make us understand this connection, which is very simple to understand. I shouldn't say nothing simple by him. Very easily understood, having to do with a candle, and it'll click better. So I'm only asking you just to hang in there a little bit more as we get to this chapter. Bezrat Hashem, next week we'll continue a little bit more. I'll read some of these lines that we didn't read that he did, and continue from there, Bezrat Hashem, and hopefully remove the glaze over your eyes. All right, have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.